Yesterday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, another significant date in the NFL offseason calendar. It was the close of the franchise tag window around the National Football League. Tuesday, March 5th. 9 players around the NFL ended up being tagged. A lot of that flurry coming toward the end of yesterday, including the Baltimore Ravens, tagging defensive lineman Justin Madubuike. Brian Burns, the edge rusher out of Carolina, was tagged as well. Michael Pittman Jr. earlier this week. Antoine Winfield Jr. from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yesterday afternoon. 9 players in total tagged by their respective clubs around the NFL. So next big date in the calendar for those players under the tag DRS, they have until July 15th to work a long-term contract extension with their NFL organization or play under the tag or hold out into training camp. Those are the big dates in the NFL offseason.
Yeah, and also, we have to take a look at the tag as is, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not a finality, right? Like, couldn't come to an agreement. It's March 6th. We just tagged you. No more negotiations. You'll play under a 1-year tag. You have all summer long, all OTAs to get this ready, and we usually see this go sometimes right up to a week before the season starts, which, again, is always a detriment. It very rarely works out in the player's favor. Hey, let me hold out all off season long and just show up at training camp, and 3 weeks later, it's hamstring injuries, it's knee injuries, it's calf injuries. So I never like that situation, but also we have to remind ourselves the cap, goes up $30 million.
Yep.
You're talking about players that are getting tagged where the franchise is telling you you're really too accomplished and too good of a football player for us to let you walk, and then telling them we still don't want to pay you all that much money, but you are really important to us here. So the bad feelings get underway right away. And also particularly, you take a look at the defensive ends. The tag is very expensive for defensive ends, but defensive ends of, let's just say, Brian Burns or Josh Allen, do you think they want to play a 1-year contract at $24 million when if they actually hit free agency, they would get $100 million in guaranteed money here? So they're not happy they got tagged. None of these players are. They want the long-term deal. But it's funny that sort of dance you have, like, yeah, you're not leaving, but we're not paying you, but we love you, right? No, it doesn't work that way. We'll see how it gets settled here. But I'm always interested in tag season where it ends up late. We got a flurry yesterday of guys that got tagged late.
So those are the 6 guys that were tagged yesterday. Michael Pittman Jr. for the Colts, Antoine Winfield Jr. for the Buccaneers, Josh Allen, the edge rusher for Jacksonville, Brian Burns, the very talented edge rusher for Carolina, Jalen Johnson for Chicago, Justin Madubuike for Baltimore. You add in T. Higgins for the Bengals, L'Jarius Sneed for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Kyle Duggar, who was placed under the transition tag for the New England Patriots. That's the grand total of 9. It is not a great thing necessarily to be placed under the franchise tag, but it is not a detriment at the same time as well. It is the franchise, as Donnie said, saying we want to keep you here. Maybe that's in good faith. Maybe that's to rework a contract and not let that player talk to 31 other NFL organizations and try to find his true market value, but still work to a long-term contract extension. And that's another key point of this. Josh Allen, a sensational edge rusher for Jacksonville. For a Jags defense that largely struggled last year, he is a cornerstone of it. Maybe you don't know the name Brian Burns as much as a Nick Bosa or a Myles Garrett or some of the other great edge rushers in the National Football League like a TJ Watt. But I'm telling you, look at the numbers in the production. Brian Burns is right up there. Maybe it's because he has played for the Carolina Panthers the last few years and the struggles Carolina has had. So, Donnie, for these guys who are cornerstones of their organization on that side of the football, it is paramount that if you really want to keep them, if you want to make them still that main figure in your franchise, you don't just franchise tag them, you rework a long-term contract extension, because otherwise they could play under the tag this year, they could hold out, they could rework a short-term deal, but that pretty much means that when next year comes to a close, they're walking into free agency.
Yeah, and most people would say, like, boy, you should be happy as a defensive end or an outside linebacker, let's just say, getting tagged for $25 million guaranteed for next season. That's fantastic. That's not the way the players look at it, because they know what their worth actually is on the open market. So they say, boy, my bank account this year should have $100 million guaranteed, and I'm only getting 25 in there. And what happens if I blow out my Achilles or tear my knee up? I'm never going to see that money I actually should have had here. But also we have to keep in mind, this is what's tough about it too. You can't just let good players walk. And we were led to believe that the Carolina Panthers, Ben, we're just going to let Brian Burns walk out the door and say to themselves, like, you know what? we just couldn't come to an agreement and good luck. Nobody's going to do
Mm-hmm.
that because, even if he does find a deal out there, you could trade him. And it doesn't have to be for the first round draft pick, right? You could say, okay, we'll lift the tag, a second round pick, we'll take back maybe 2/3 and let you go. You can't have these talented players certainly walk out the door, but also at the same time, take a look at it from the other team's side. Let's just say the Philadelphia Eagles say, you know what, we really want to revamp that defensive line, the New York Giants or the New York Jets. We would love to get Brian Burns in here. Like, if you say it's a first-round draft pick, and let's just say it's a top 10 pick for the Jets, and you say to yourself, okay, well, if we get him as a rookie, as a top 10 pick, we got 5 years here under salary cap management here. We think he's going to be a great player. But it's different for NFL teams now, Ben. You go, okay, wait, I got to give up probably a top 15 pick, then pay this guy like $175 million with $100 million guaranteed. It's not worth it. And that's what the player's frustration is. And I'll leave it at this. The franchise tag doesn't breed goodwill between the player and the franchise. No. So let's just say nothing comes to an agreement. The player doesn't want to lose $25 million. So he holds out till week 6. He's disgruntled and then starts going like, you know what? My ankle doesn't feel so good. I'm going to miss 2 weeks here. Nobody wants disgruntled employees showing up to work. You want them happy, you want them paid, and you want them performing. The franchise tag usually, Ben, is a hindrance on that.
That is very much the case. And often it will be what the franchise is telling that player and his representation. Of course, we saw this last year. The two main running backs, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, tagged. They were going to hold out from training camp. They both rework a short-term deal following the end of when that time period is, July 15th this year, that you could rework a long-term contract extension. When Lamar Jackson was placed under the franchise tag by Baltimore at this point of the offseason a season ago, Donnie, it was, are any of the other 31 NFL organizations going to go out there and trade for Lamar? Because you can. When they're under the franchise tag, you can go trade for them, but they are not a free agent, not even a restricted free agent. And if you trade for a Brian Burns or a Josh Allen, you would think that you probably rework a long-term contract extension. So those were the 9 guys placed under the franchise tag. How about some notable names that were not? None of the main running backs were placed under the tag. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, nor Austin Eckler. Some wide receivers like Calvin Ridley. We did not have Chris Jones placed under the tag. Kansas City put it on L'Jarius Sneed. That was the expected outcome. As for Chris Jones, it was higher than what even a defensive tackle is set to make under the tag. Baker Mayfield will get to test free agency. And that is the next key date in the NFL offseason calendar. Starting Monday, noon Eastern time. It is when NFL clubs can have contact with free agents around the NFL. Officially, the league year begins on Wednesday, exactly a week from today, Wednesday, March 13th. That's when any contract news we hear becomes official. But we will start to get some of those reports and tweets from the NFL Insiders DRS as early as Monday afternoon, when contact can be made between an NFL organization and a free agent.
That's fantastic. And the first thing I did yesterday, I was, going out, walking the dog, checking the lines here, seeing what we're getting, some of the NFL news. Like, when does free agency actually start? Expecting it to be like 3 weeks away. But the fact that it started up on Monday is fantastic, because you will get offers, and you will get those agreed upon offers on March 11th on Monday. You just have to wait until Wednesday to actually sign those. So it'll be fun to get that started right away. But you brought up some of these players that did not get tagged. They're very good football players, but the running back position certainly diminished. Here's the thing that makes a big difference here. It's the teams that have these players that are choosing not to tag. And outside of Tony Pollard, who last year was on a division-winning team in the Dallas Cowboys, did he perform all that great? No, and he even said it himself. Well, I didn't feel right till like week 10 last year, coming off of that broken leg the year before. But let's take a look at Saquon Barkley. I got news for you here. I know the Giants fans love him at this point. You're going to win 6 games next year with or without Saquon Barkley. There's no way you're tagging that guy, and you shouldn't even be offering a long-term extension, because he will be broken down by the time you think you will actually be good. The same thing with Josh Jacobs. He's a really good running back, but not for the Raiders. Again, the Raiders will probably win 6 games next year with or without their running back. Now, if you're saying to yourself, these guys, there's no options, they're hitting free agency, that's not the case here, because we always bring up teams like, let's just say DeAndre Swift leaves the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles think they can make a run at the NFC East. One of those running backs could slide in there perfectly at the right dollar sign. The Buffalo Bills, we've talked about them, it feels like, for years and years. You tell me Saquon Barkley or Jacob shows up on the Buffalo Bills next year, it's not going to make a difference? It absolutely will. running backs you can't pay on teams that they won't make a difference for. Even Derrick Henry's out there, who has tread left on the tires, at least for the next year or two here. Why would he come back to the Tennessee Titans, and why would the Titans pay him? They're going nowhere next year. So a lot of these really good running backs are going to find spots here, and these teams that get them probably going to get a deal, and they can actually help the football team win a championship, unlike the Raiders and the Giants, who are going nowhere next year.
So let's put things into comparable terms just from the financial investment perspective of this all. Last running back to get a long-term contract extension, Nick Chubb, now nearly 3 years ago. Dalvin Cook was cut last year by the Minnesota Vikings. We were all blown away. 4 straight seasons as a Pro Bowler. 4 straight seasons with at least 13 games played. 4 straight seasons with at least 1,100 yards on the ground. He was a free agent for a very long time, signing with the New York Jets during training camp for a 1-year deal worth $5.8 million guaranteed. Of course, that did not work out. But that is probably what a Saquon Barkley or a Derrick Henry or even an Austin Eckler is going to get. Maybe with the same team that is going to let them test free agency, but elsewhere around the National Football League. You see Chris Jones, who will become a free agent. No tag, as our producers like to make that inside joke. But I do believe Kansas City will look to rework and restructure a long-term contract extension with him. Let's go to the name at the top of this board, Donnie. Do you believe Baker Mayfield will be playing in Tampa Bay as the Buccaneers starting quarterback next season?
1,000%. And that's probably the reason why they didn't slap that tag on him. But also keep in mind as well, if you're starting the quarterback position, Ben, on a franchise tag around $40 million, the minute you put that franchise tag down, you have to account for that money. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading into free agency are like, you know what? We think there's a really good chance he's coming back, but I can't slap $40 million on him and say, oh, no, we have to be salary cap compliant right away here, and I got to cut players hoping that we can renegotiate this thing. There's enough goodwill in that building where he wants to come back. They want to sign him. They'll just have to figure out a deal, but you can't tie up that salary cap. It's the same thing that you talk about with Chris Jones. We know Chris Jones wants to be a Chief, and the Chiefs want him back, but you can't slap that tag down where it's like $30 million for him and say, all right, now let's hit free agency. You can't do that here. You have to be smart and sensible, and a lot of these organizations did that. But for Baker Mayfield, I can't see him going anywhere but Tampa Bay, Ben.
Completely agree. And that's the really interesting part about Baker Mayfield, who was brought in last year, of course, led the Bucs to a divisional title, led the Tampa Bay to an NFL playoff victory as well. When he signed with Tampa, 1-year deal worth $4 million that could be up to about $8.5 million based on incentives. Donnie said what the franchise tag number was for quarterbacks, pretty close to $40 million. Tampa doesn't want to do that. They might have a long-term deal in place for Baker Mayfield, but it's not going to be for that amount of money fully guaranteed in terms of the cap space hit for this upcoming season. So it's all of the financial maneuvering that goes into the franchise tag window or letting a player walk to free agency that might not be a truly free agent when all is said and done. And the league year begins exactly 1 week from today.